Marianne Fletcher stood at the bottom of the attic stairs, looking up into the darkness with a mixture of determination and dread. At 67 years old, she'd been putting off cleaning the attic for at least a decade. But her daughter Claire was hosting Thanksgiving this year, and Claire had gently suggested that maybe Marianne should start thinking about downsizing. "Not selling the house, Mom," Claire had said carefully. "Just maybe going through some things? You've lived here for 43 years. Claire was right. The house, a 4-bedroom Victorian that Marianne and her late husband George had bought in 1980, was too big for one person. Marianne climbed the narrow stairs, pulling the string to turn on the bare bulb. The attic stretched the length of the house, crowded with boxes, old furniture, trunks, and 4 decades of accumulated debris. She spotted a stack of boxes labeled George's Mother Estate, 1998, and felt a pang. George's mother, Helen, had died 26 years ago. George had packed up her things, brought them here, and they'd been sitting ever since. George had died 10 years ago, a heart attack at 62, sudden and shocking. Marianne pulled the top box down, coughing at the dust. Inside were old photographs, documents, books. She sat on an old trunk and began sorting. Helen had been a difficult woman. Cold, critical, demanding. She'd never particularly liked Marianne, had made it clear that George could have done better. Their relationship had been polite but distant. When Helen died, Marianne had felt relief more than grief. The photos showed a younger Helen, severe even in her 20s, unsmiling in her wedding photo, stern-faced holding baby George. Marianne had always wondered why Helen was so joyless. Marianne dug deeper and found a smaller box nested inside, wrapped in faded blue fabric. Roughly shoebox-sized, tied with a ribbon that had once been white but was now yellowed. Something made her hesitate. A sense that once she looked inside, something would change. She unwrapped the fabric and opened the box. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. Maybe 100. Tied in bundles with string. The envelopes were old, addressed in flowing handwriting. To Helen Morrison, 47 Elm Street, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. From James Cooper, U.S. Army, APO, San Francisco. The postmark was 1944. Helen's maiden name had been Morrison, and James Cooper, Marianne had never heard that name. Helen had married George's father, Robert Fletcher, in 1945. With shaking hands, Marianne opened the first letter. My dearest Helen, 3 months since I held you, and every day feels like a year. I carry your photograph everywhere. In my pocket during drills, under my pillow at night, pressed against my heart when the shelling starts. I dream of the day I come home and make you my wife. I dream of the house we'll have, the garden you'll plant, the children who'll have your beautiful eyes. I dream of growing old with you, my darling Helen, of 50 years of mornings waking beside you. The war won't last forever. I'll come home, we'll have our life together. Forever yours, James. Marianne stared at the letter, her mind reeling. Who was James Cooper? Why had Helen kept these letters hidden? She opened another letter. Dearest Helen, your letters are oxygen. When the world is nothing but mud and blood and men screaming, I read your words and remember there's still beauty somewhere. When I return, we'll be married immediately. I don't want to wait another day. Count the days, my darling. I am. All my love, James. Marianne opened letter after letter. James Cooper had been Helen's fiancé, her great love. They'd met in 1943, fallen deeply in love, planned a future together. His letters were tender, passionate, full of dreams. Helen's letters, Marianne found carbons, were equally loving. Helen, who'd been cold and harsh for as long as Marianne had known her, had once written, You are the song my heart sings. Come home to me, my darling. The letters continued through 1944 and into early 1945. Then came a different letter, official military stationery. Dear Miss Morrison, it is with deepest regret that I must inform you of the death of Sergeant James Cooper, killed in action on February 23, 1945, during operations in the Pacific Theater. Please accept our sincere condolences for your loss. Marianne sat in the dusty attic, tears streaming down her face for a man she'd never met, and a young woman named Helen who'd loved him. James had died in February 1945. Helen had married Robert Fletcher in November 1945, 9 months later. The cold, harsh woman Marianne had known suddenly made terrible sense. Helen hadn't been born joyless. She'd had her joy killed in the Pacific on February 23, 1945. Marianne found Helen's unsent response to the military notification. James? They say you're dead. You can't be dead. We were going to have a life together. You promised to come home. I don't know how to exist in a world without you. How am I supposed to marry someone else when my body, my heart, my soul belong to you? But I have to survive. My parents say I must move on, must be practical. Robert Fletcher has asked to court me. He's a good man, he's kind, he's not you. Forgive me, James. Forgive me for surviving when you didn't. Forgive me for the life I'll live without you. I will never love anyone the way I loved you. Helen. Marianne wiped her eyes. Helen had married Robert not out of love, but out of survival. In 1945, unmarried women had limited options. She'd married a kind man she didn't love to have security. And she'd spent the next 53 years married to a man who wasn't James Cooper. Marianne found one last item, a photograph. A young man in uniform, handsome and smiling, standing beside a young woman with dark hair and joy in her eyes. On the back, James and Helen, October 1943, the happiest day of my life. The woman in the photograph bore no resemblance to the Helen Marianne had known. This Helen was radiant, luminous, transformed by love. What had it cost Helen to hide these letters, to live a life with a man she didn't love, while carrying the memory of the man she did? Marianne packed up the letters carefully and called Claire. I found something in the attic. Letters. A love story I never knew existed. Come over, Marianne said. I need to tell you about your grandmother, the real story. Claire arrived within an hour. Marianne spread the letters across the dining room table. Your grandmother was engaged before she married your grandfather, to a soldier named James Cooper. He died in the war, and she kept his letters hidden for 60 years. Claire picked up one of the letters, reading with wide eyes. Grandma Helen wrote this? The same Grandma Helen who never hugged me, who criticized everything. The same. They read through the letters together, Claire growing quieter with each one. I never knew, Claire said softly. I thought Grandma was just mean, cold. Neither did I. But Claire, imagine it. She was 22. Engaged to the love of her life, and he died. She married your grandfather 9 months later. She spent her whole life with a man she didn't love, keeping this secret. Claire picked up the photograph of young Helen and James. She looked so happy here. I never saw her look like that. Because James took that happiness with him when he died. This changes things, doesn't it? How we remember her. It does for me. She wasn't just a difficult woman, she was a heartbroken woman who had to survive anyway. Do you think she loved Grandpa at all? I think she cared for him. But love? The kind of love in these letters? No. Over the next few days, Marianne became obsessed with the letters. She felt like she was meeting her mother-in-law for the first time, seeing the woman Helen had been before grief hardened her. She also felt a deep sadness for the life Helen had lived. Trapped in a marriage to a man she didn't love, growing old and bitter because staying soft was too painful. Marianne thought about her own marriage to George. They'd loved each other, not the passionate love in James's letters, but a comfortable, companionable love. It had been good. But what if George had died early? Would she have become like Helen, cold, distant, protecting herself from ever being hurt that deeply again? Thanksgiving arrived. Claire was hosting. The whole family would be there, Claire's husband and children, Marianne's son David and his family, various relatives. Marianne made a decision. She would tell them about Helen and James. After the meal, after dishes were cleared, Marianne asked everyone to stay at the table. I want to tell you a story about Grandma Helen, about who she was before any of us knew her. She told them about the letters, about James and Helen's love, about his death and her grief and her practical marriage to Robert. She passed around the photograph of young Helen, radiant and joyful. "I always thought Grandma was just mean," David said. "I didn't know she was sad." She was both. The sadness made her mean, the loss made her hard. But underneath there was a young woman who'd loved someone so much that losing him broke something that never healed. Claire's teenage daughter Emma spoke up. "So she never loved Grandpa Robert? That's awful." "I think she cared for him, but no, I don't think she was in love with him." "Why didn't she just not get married?" Emma asked. "Because in 1945 women didn't have many choices. Helen needed security. Marriage was how women survived." The family talked for hours, reimagining Helen, rewriting their family history. The cold grandmother became the grieving young woman. The harsh mother-in-law became the heartbroken bride who'd married the wrong man. "What will you do with the letters?" David asked. "I'm thinking about donating them to a World War II museum. James's story is part of history. Helen's story is part of history. All those women who lost their loves and had to survive anyway, their stories matter." That evening, after everyone left, Marianne sat alone with the letters. She pulled out one of her favorites. "My dearest Helen, you asked what I dream about when I dream of our future. Darling, I dream of everything. I dream of Sunday mornings making breakfast together. I dream of reading the newspaper while you garden. I dream of coming home from work to find you there, of the ordinary magic of living beside you day after day. I dream of our children. I dream of watching you become a mother, of growing old together, of sitting on our porch when we're 70 and still holding hands. Forever yours, James." Marianne wiped her eyes. James hadn't come home safe. He died at 24, and Helen had spent 60 years living the life they'd planned, but with the wrong man. And yet Helen had survived. She'd lived. She'd raised a son, kept a household, endured. Was survival enough, or had Helen spent 60 years not really living, just going through the motions? Marianne thought about her own life. She'd been widowed for 10 years, living alone in this big house, going through her own motions. Was she really living? Or just surviving? The letters had made her question everything. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, Marianne contacted a World War II museum. The curator was thrilled. "These letters tell the real story of the war, the human cost. We'd like to create an exhibit around them. James and Helen's story as a lens into wartime love and loss." The museum put together a beautiful exhibit. The letters displayed chronologically, telling the love story from beginning to tragic end. Photographs of young James in uniform, young Helen radiant with joy, the older Helen that Marianne had known. The exhibit text explained, Helen Morrison lost her fiancé in World War II and, like many women of her generation, had to rebuild a life from the ashes. She married, raised a family, and lived to be 98. These letters, hidden for 6 decades, reveal the love story that shaped the rest of her life. Marianne attended the opening with Claire, David, and Emma. "There she is," Emma said, pointing to the photograph. "She was beautiful." She was. And she was loved. That matters. The exhibit became popular. People came from all over. Many brought their own stories. Loves lost, lives rebuilt from grief. One elderly woman approached Marianne. "I lost my fiancé in Korea. I married someone else a year later. But I never stopped loving my first love. Never. Thank you for sharing these. For showing we all carried these losses. That we all had to survive anyway." 3 months after the exhibit opened, Marianne received a phone call from the museum. A man named Thomas Cooper came to see the exhibit. "He says James Cooper was his uncle. He'd like to meet you." They met at a coffee shop. Thomas Cooper was in his 70s, with James's eyes. "I never knew my uncle," Thomas explained. "He died before I was born. But I found some of his things after my parents passed." He pulled out an envelope. This was among his personal effects returned from the war. "I think it belongs with the other letters." Marianne opened it with shaking hands. A letter from James, dated February 22, 1945, the day before he died. "My darling Helen, tomorrow we go into battle. If something happens to me, If I don't come home, I need you to know these things. I love you more than life itself. The 6 months we had together were worth more than a lifetime with anyone else. If I don't make it, please don't stop living. Don't let grief consume you. Find happiness again, my darling. Marry someone good. Have children. Plant your garden. Live the life we planned, even if you have to live it without me. I won't be angry. I'll be grateful that you survived, that you found joy again, that the world still has your light in it. You are allowed to love again. You are allowed to be happy. That's not betraying me. It's honoring what we had by refusing to let my death kill you too. Be happy, my love. Promise me you'll be happy. Forever and always yours, James. Marianne read it 3 times, tears streaming. He wanted her to be happy. He gave her permission. I thought she should have this, Thomas said gently, even though she's gone. Helen had spent her entire life feeling guilty for surviving, for marrying Robert, but James had wanted her to be happy. He'd given her permission to love again, to live fully. And she'd never known. The letter had been returned to his family, not sent to her. May I add this letter to the exhibit? Marianne asked. That's why I brought it. The museum added it with new text. James Cooper's last letter gave Helen permission to be happy. She never received it. She spent the rest of her life carrying guilt for surviving. If she had known his final wish, would her life have been different? The following Thanksgiving, Marianne gave Emma copies of some letters, including James's last one. Why are you giving these to me? Because you're 19, close to the age Helen was when she met James. I want you to remember something. What? That love is precious, that life is short, that you should love fully while you can. And that if something terrible happens, if you lose someone you love, you're allowed to survive, you're allowed to rebuild, you're allowed to be happy again. That's not betrayal, it's honoring what you had. That evening, Marianne returned home alone. She'd been thinking about selling the house, downsizing. Helen had lived in a house too big, filled with memories of a life she'd never had. She'd survived, but never really lived. Marianne didn't want that. At 67, she still had time. Time to live, not just survive. She decided to sell the house. Not because she had to, but because she chose to. To start a new chapter. To honor Helen's story by living the life Helen had never given herself permission to live. A life of joy and possibility, not just grief and endurance. Before packing, Marianne wrote a letter. Dear Helen, I found your letters. I know about James now. I'm sorry you carried that grief alone for so long. I'm sorry you never knew James wanted you to be happy. I'm sorry you felt guilty for surviving. But your story mattered. Your love mattered. You survived something that should have destroyed you. You raised a good son who became a good man. Your survival created a whole family. I'm going to honor your story by refusing to make your mistakes. I'm going to live, Helen, really live, not just survive. I'm going to be happy, without guilt. I'm going to do what James asked you to do. I'm going to be happy. With love, Marianne. She folded the letter and placed it with James's letters. Then she picked up her phone and called Claire. I've decided to sell the house, and I want to plan a trip, somewhere I've always wanted to go but never have. Where do you want to go? I don't know yet. Somewhere new, somewhere full of life. Marianne looked around the house that had been hers for 43 years. Soon it would belong to someone else. But that was okay. She was ready for something new. Helen's letters had taught her that life was too short to stay stuck in the past. Love was too precious to take for granted. And happiness, real happiness, not just survival, was worth pursuing, no matter how old you were. At 67, Marianne was finally learning what Helen never did. It's never too late to choose joy.